These steps in this 12-step program in relation to our addictions is a way of strength, how to handle life situations and our addictions, right? Our addiction to alcohol could be drugs, people. Definitely, we always talk here about the food. So to get started on page 68, I'm just going to do 1 or 2 sentences of reading here, but on page 68 in the big book, where what's called the fear prayers, but it says in the second one, in the third paragraph, we laugh at those who think spirituality is a way of weakness, paradoxically is a way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. So there you go. So we need courage and strength towards our addiction. So let's take food, for instance. We try through human self-will, trying to figure this out with the food through diet programs, whatever it was. We took medications for it, pills, and we also even had surgery done for it, but to no avail. Again, Dr. Silkworth told us in the big book, in Doc's Opinion in the 1930s, that there was no human aid. The doctors and the scientists they couldn't figure out the answer to addiction or alcoholism. So in our case, it's compulsive eating. We have compulsion towards food. It could be overeating, undereating, whatever our compulsion is, anorexia, bulimia. But it's interesting. This compulsion, and it says here, is related to everything else in our life, and everything else in our life is related to this. And what I mean by that is, the other day I was at a meeting and somebody said to me, what does any of this have to do with their addiction to food? It was an Overeaters Anonymous meeting, and I was reading the steps, and I started talking about this self-centered fear and resentment and anger, as it talks about on page, if you go to page 64, what does it say there? So I started reading this. I started saying, resentment, let me get it to, on page 66, sorry. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit means do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic whose hope is the maintenance of a growth of a spiritual experience, the business of resentment is infinitely grave. Now here, I started out by resentment, then I read the second part of this paragraph, and the person started to understand. We found that is fatal, for when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of spirit. The insanity of alcohol, we could talk about insanity of any addiction, it could be food addiction, compulsions, returns, and we drink again, and with us, to drink is to die. To drink is to die. People are dying from this food addiction. People are dying from drug addiction. People are dying from people addiction. How many people, resentment and anger, 99% of the time is related to people. And a lot of people, do themselves in through the drugs, alcohol, right? But it's the same thing as jumping off a bridge or whatever you do. The food, you realize it's a slow death. We're killing ourselves. You realize the alcohol, definitely, and the drugs. But it's interesting to talk about drugs and alcohol and the deaths from that. It's really sad what goes on with that. But how many more people in our country are dying from their food addiction, the food they eat, the poisons they eat? So the way of strength here, and it also says in here on page 68, it says, and I love this phrase here, paradoxically, it is a way of strength. That phrase there we had read before. Paradoxically, what does that mean? Because in my mind, I never figured out until I did these steps in the program. I always try to do everything by self-will. If I could get better than other people, be more successful, make more money, if I could control and have a way to control my eating or my alcoholism or control people, how about that one? What does it say in the big book here on page 60? We want to be direct to the play. And I love the phrase, it says, if only everybody else would act the way I felt they should and I could direct them, they would be happy and I'd be happy. Never worked out. All these addictions, all my problems in life are due to the same thing. So it's very hard, and again, it's paradoxical because who would think, and when I came in, these 12 steps in this program would not only relieve my alcoholism, drug addiction, my food addiction, and my life, and we live life, not fighting anyone or anything. Again, that goes back to fighting the food through a diet or figuring out or constraining it. Nothing ever works, and that was, again, in the 1930s, Dr. Silkworth said that. Here we are in 2022. Guess what? Let me know if anybody there knows of any scientific improvement to figure out the solution to alcoholism food addiction, drug addiction. Still haven't figured it out. But Dr. Silkworth said there's one solution, a spiritual solution. If you like the video and want to spread the message, press the like and subscribe button. Thank you. So right now, right here, we can have that spiritual solution. And again, I said about that phrase I saw, somebody would said, I was jaywalking when it hit me. Now we have the story of the jaywalker in the big book where it talks about this guy keeps on getting hit by cars, and then but he keeps on going back to it. Because in a lot of cases, we're called the hopeless variety. We have, the phenomenon of craving, allergy, whatever it is. But the hopeless variety is that we could be a simple eater, right? Which would be the type of eater, well, they could take it or leave it, they gain a few pounds, whatever it is, or they have a little compulsion either direction, then they can straighten themselves out. The moderate, still the same thing. When they're ready to, they can take control of it. But we're the hopeless variety. If you're the hopeless variety, I know I am, or was, or whatever you want to say, we can recover. And they talk about being recovered. But, people always get that confused. Say, how can you be recovered from these addictions? We're recovered, but we're not cured, depending on our fit spiritual condition. So the way of strength is spirituality, fit spiritual condition. We're spiritual people. Remember that in the human experience, not humans in the spiritual experience. It's the other, it's the other way around. We're meant to be spiritual because it's through our ego and self-centered fear that says, I got a great idea. If I restrict this food, I can control it. If I eat tons of food, then I'll feel better, momentary pleasure. We have a better way. A way of strength, and it's paradoxical. It really is. We couldn't figure it out, and also a reminder in Bill's story, he talks about common sense will be uncommon sense. So keep on fighting all of these things, trying to control people, trying to control your addictions, and to what avail? And you got to ask yourself, how's that working out for you? And I'm very confident saying this because if anybody at the meeting wants to tell me on how, look, I will tell you what happened to me. I went for a year. Controlling the food and being on a strict what's called the gray sheet diet. I mean, I had it all figured out, eat this, eat that. But I was miserable for the whole year, and that day finally came where and also I had a goal weight, and I did get down to that. But then when I was there, it didn't become that important. What I have now, through this God consciousness, is a way of living, a new design for living. I love the phrase AA, attitude adjustment, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, if you want to put it in more scientific today, terms of psychological terms, meaning a perception change towards life. But the only way I found is through a spiritual connection. And these steps, again, step one said I'm powerless. So I didn't realize when I went in and I was doing all this diets, trying to control everything, but step one told me I couldn't. Step two said I was insane. How's your thinking towards your addiction towards food? Whether you're anorexic, bulimia, binge eater, whatever it is, or how about your alcohol or drug addiction? Or how about the people addiction? How insane are we when we go around worrying about what people say, do, or think? There's the insanity of it. When I started to realize step two made me realize I was insane, my thinking. And the question would be, what do you mean you think is insane? Yeah, my thinking was what society told me, the corporations told me about the food, what my parents told me, all of these things came into my brain and what's called the intellect. When I was a little child, I was in the present playing. Also, a puppy dog is always in the present. It doesn't have this high cerebral way of thinking. But we can get over that and get centered and feel the spirituality, the joy and happiness from within. And when I do that, God's gift to me is the water. And I always say this alone. You have that spiritual awakening right now and transfer your thinking where you want clarity. You don't want to drink with 600, 1,200 calories in one of those gloopy drinks. After a while, this thing clears out your palate, and then you taste the deliciousness of everything. When you have all these processed foods, you can't. It totally takes you out of it. All of the synthetic sugars and oil, and also processed foods condensed, right? It's all like 3 times the calories. They put oil, like, how about a potato, which I have here? This is God's gift. And see, this is the intuitiveness. So most people say, well, it's full of carbohydrates, has a lot of calories. For its size, it has very few calories. Actually, I eat quite a few. This is a small potato here, but you can eat a lot. Whereas where you put oil on it, fry it, or whatever you do, and people put all kinds of other garbage on French fries or whatever it is, it's 3 times the calories.